focus, and also, as the screen says, sales were the focus. But if you would, just tell the story. How did you hear about top grading, and what did you do to roll it out, and what kind of results did you get, and where are you today, and any advice you'd have for people?
Sure. So first of all, thanks to Brad for not only bringing us top grading, but it's very flattering to be asked to participate in a call like this. I've actually been on the receiving end of this call. George did a similar session probably a year ago, and so I've heard this, so it's very flattering to be asked. So before I talk a little about top grading, let me give everyone the two-sentence version of Benco. So we are the third largest distributor of dental products in the United States. So basically, our customers are dentists, and everything you see in a dentist's office is what we sell. We have about 1,300 employees, or associates as we call them, in about 40 states throughout the United States, and we have a small office in the Philippines as well. Our revenues are around $650 million. We are a family-owned business, independent, founded in 1930 by my grandfather. My father is still involved in the business. He's second generation, and my brother and I are the third generation co-owners of the business. So we've got about my grandfather started the business in 1930. So it's a pretty long success story, and we're happy to be here and stewards of the future. So the secret to our success, like most of your success or any success we've had, really is the people side. We have been one of the best places to work in Pennsylvania for 10 of the last 11 years. That's probably our most proud credential that we're most proud of. And a big piece of our success with people has been top grading. So the answer to the question that Brad specifically asked was, around 2005 or so, we hired a VP of sales who came from a larger corporation, and he said, we've been using a system called top grading, and I think we should give it a try here at Benco. And George, who was here at the time, and I sort of said, look, what's top grading? We're not sure. And then Mike, who was the VP of sales, instructed us to buy and read this very long, heavy book. Like many of you, I slogged my way through it. I love Brad and I love the system, and I would also say that it's, the book Top Grading is a great book, and it's not exactly a page turner all the time, but we did actually get through it. And the first pushback we had was, well, this seems like it's for much bigger companies than ours, General Electric and those kinds of companies. But after we got into it and understood the system better, we decided that it really did have very good applications in our organization. And it's been really key to our success with people and the growth of the business. So that's a quick story of how we got into top grading. Like many of you probably, you heard about it from somebody else. It was a referral. And then as we've gotten more and more into it, we found other uses and other applications that have worked very well. And now here we are 8 years later and very proud of the success that we've had. So, Brad, I think the next step is probably to give a more granular sort of history of what we've done, how we rolled it out. Does that make sense?
Yes, it sure does. Thank you. Yeah.
So we started on our end by asking our senior team to read the book, and we really started with a couple of specific projects. The first thing that we started with was really working on interviewing skills. So when Brad asked me to put some thoughts together, I made a list of 3 main breakthroughs that I think we've had thanks to the top grading system. And then going forward, we have a 4th project that we're working on. So the first real breakthrough that we had was really getting everyone trained in the organization to have better interviewing skills and to use the top grading interview system. That resulted right away in a huge improvement in the quality of the interviews and the quality of the people that we hire. And the basic question that I usually ask people when we talk about top grading is, do you interview? And the answer is everyone interviews. And do you feel as a hiring manager that the interview is an integral, if not the most important part of the hiring process? And very rare is the hiring manager, who says, yeah, the interview is key. Usually people admit that they're not great interviewers, they don't quite know what to ask, and they don't find that the interview is an integral part of the hiring process. They do it because they know they should. The place where we started was really getting everyone trained on doing better, more substantive interviews that are really revealing about the character and the work history of the prospective employees we're talking to. And we found that we got a big bump in results just from that alone. That was really our first step.
If I could just interject
no, please.
Something, and that is, my team has done some research, and for the past 40 years, there's been a dominant commonplace method of interviewing. Almost all Fortune 500 companies use round-robin so-called competency or behavior interviews. And I don't want to go up too far on the history, but 40, 50 years ago, I mean, just all the research that universities were doing on hiring and selection and talent showed the results were awful, and that the typical interview was like this. Joe, tell me about yourself. So they're the interviewers looking at a resume and says, Joe, tell me about yourself. And then the interviewee says, well, actually, I think you're looking at the wrong resume. My name's Chuck. I mean, that bad. Okay, so the competency interview world, there are a lot of companies out there. Development Dimensions Incorporated with targeted selection is by far the best known. And they had a good idea. Let's start with the job description. Understand what the job is. That's a good idea. What are the competencies necessary in order to succeed at that job? That's a good idea. Now let's have a round-robin succession of interviews in which all candidates are asked the same, perhaps 6 questions about the different competencies. So maybe there are 6 different competencies. One is organization. So if I were the interviewer, then I might have printed out the interview guide. And I have to use the same interview guide with all candidates. The EEOC is pretty rigorous about that, as they should be. So I'd be asking questions such as, Chuck, could you give me an example of a time you were well organized? Okay, and maybe I would even ask the other side of that. Can you give me an example of a time you were not so well organized? But basically, these are interviews that produce, again and again, our research has demonstrated, only about 20% high performers hired. So even though this is systematic, it's standardized, it's based on a job description, the competencies are identified, there are some huge flaws in that process if it results in 80%? Yes. I don't think we've ever talked to a company using the approach who ever claimed even 50% high performers hired. Now, if you lower the bar and say we're going to include people we consider disappointments, but not so bad we'd fire them, all right, then they have 80% success. But the trouble is with that approach is that it's so easy for interviewees to take control. They get to control everything. They know what the questions are. I mean, Forrest Gump could fake answers to those questions. They're very predictable, and they get to pick from their whole career an example of being well organized or a good team player or passer or whatever the competency is. And every book on hiring says if you're asked for an example of when you did not show that competency, pick one that really is not very serious or one where you definitely fixed that issue. So that's a problem. Too many interviewees have fictitious resumes, and they're able to fake the interviews. So Chuck said he's emphasizing training. Well, people who've been trained in how to do the competency or behavior interviews might be very good in some respects. Our eye contact is good, they take good notes, they don't lead the witness and so forth. But the result is very poor. So the top grading interview is a chronological interview, goes through all the jobs, asks for every key success, every key failure, every key decision, every key relationship, the boss ratings, and so forth. So that's the top grading interview that Chuck was talking about that people were trained in. I'm sorry, back to you, Chuck.
And I would just build on what Brad said. I will speak from my own experience and tell you that before I understood top grading, I was a lousy interviewer. I used to lose interest in them, and I didn't quite understand why I did interviews. So that's my own experience. When I learned the top grading methodology for interviews, I think I became a much better interviewer, and I will tell you that the interviews that I conduct now are much more focused and much more revealing than the interviews I did before, where you ask stupid questions like, if you were a dog, what would you be? Or I don't know, whatever question they're asking at the time. But now, what I see out of the top grading interview now is it's much easier to see the patterns in a candidate's career and how the same issues keep coming out over and over again when you do a top grading interview. And I thought the key little learning for me in a top grading interview is not only is it chronological, but start at the beginning and not at the end. That seems like such a simple thing, but I think the interviews are just much, much better when I can say, when we start by saying, tell us where you went to high school. What did you want to do with your life? Tell us really about your journey from where you started even before your work career started to where you are now. How did you get there? What went right? What didn't go right? And I would say that little training itself, and it's not little, it was pretty substantial to do, has vastly improved the quality of the hires we have at Benco. And that was really, I would say, our first top grading breakthrough.
The question just came in, and we'll do formalized questions later. But, well, what do you learn about the person today when you're asking about high school or college or job one? Someone just...
Well, the first thing is I want to know, that's a really good question. So there's a couple things that I at least listen for when we talk about high school and college. Number one is, are you where you want it to be? And I'm not saying that I want to hire somebody who's where they want to be, who is now where they wanted to be years ago. But I'd like to know, how did you get started in your career journey? Where did you want to be? And if you say, yeah, I always grew up wanting to be a doctor, but now I'm a sales rep, well, I'd like to understand why, because my bias is I want to hire people who are where they want to be, or at least have a good explanation for how they got where they are. So that's the first thing. Second thing is I like to hear how did you pay for your college education? Were you ambitious? Were you a college athlete? Did you have leadership positions? Because I'm a big believer that, there are some examples of late bloomers in life, but basically we all are who we were in high school, or we all are today who we were in college. So I want to know sort of how did you get started? What kind of things did you like to do? If the position calls for leadership skills, in a perfect world, I'd like to hear about your leadership experience and successes or failures, starting from your high school career, starting from your college career. Did you grow up in a difficult situation at home? If so, how did that shape the person that you've become today? These are all things that I think are important that come out in the high school and college discussion, even before we talk about first job.
Yeah, the key word in that is today.
Yep.
All of that, we don't, in a sense, we don't really care that much about what happened 15, 20 years ago, but it does relate to who they are today. And it's the patterns. You see how the patterns evolved as that acorn turned into the oak tree. And so you really get deep insights into all the key competencies. I flew to Boston on Monday, did a tandem top grading interview with the CEO of a client company. And on the plane coming back, I was typing my 6,575th report. The reason I'm saying this, when I have the recommendation and then strengths and weaker points, then interpretive career history. I've started every single report on every single candidate I've ever interviewed with how the person was hardwired in those formative years and what the implications are for the person today. So everything relates to that word today. We get better insights into what the person is like today if we see, it's like a videotape of their whole journey through life. That's one way to put it. Okay, back to you,
No
Chuck.
question about it. So the first breakthrough through top grading was the interview and improving the quality of the interviews. And the question I would have for everyone on the call is, do you believe that the interview process is integral to the hiring process in your organization? If the answer is yes, then you're probably doing something right. If the answer is no, then there's opportunities to improve. The second breakthrough was sort of a more subtle one, but boy, oh boy, I think it's made a big impact, and that was really redoing the job application. We were very sloppy about our job application at Benco, and we really did not ask enough information to people as they were walking in the door to apply for a job. And when you think about it, the application is a place where, as long as it's within the realm of the law, the EEOC and things like that, and by the way, I'm a big fan of what the EEOC does, and I think what Brad said before is right. They do a lot of good things. There aren't, when you think about it, that many restrictions. You can ask a lot of good information in the application that basically will reveal a lot about the applicant before they even walk in the door for the first interview. At Benco, we were very sloppy about that. A lot of times we would commit the cardinal sin of taking the person's resume in lieu of an application. We wouldn't ask about every single job they had. There was never enough room. I mean, it's stupid stuff like there was only room to write 2 or 3 jobs there. So if you had 6 or 7, You had an excuse to not write them all down. We didn't ask for supervisors, all the things you can read about in the top grading book. But the quality of the applicants and the quality of the interviews and the hires went up substantially just from overhauling and making better and improving the application that we ask applicants to complete before they even come for a job. So that's huge, and I really recommend the top grading application as a place to start for every organization, no matter how you decide to implement the top grading system.
Yeah, I might put in there that over a period of decades, we've refined the words around something that is, we think, incredibly powerful, but of course your opinion on that would be very important. It's the truth serum, what in the various books we call the torque technique, the thread of reference check. By mentioning there's one sentence, and again, this it could be our career history form, or what most companies do is what Chuck has referred to is just embed some of these key top grading tools in your own application form. But there's a simple statement: a final step in hiring is for candidates to arrange reference calls with former managers and others, and that it's repeated with every job. What that does is scare away those with the fictitious resumes. We've had people in our workshops who own companies that do checks, background checks, and we've heard stats like over 50% of resumes have deliberate falsehoods. What does that mean? Claiming to go to a college and they never did. Omitting a couple of jobs that were short-term that didn't work out. I mean, really serious stuff. Anyway, when people believe, candidates believe, that they're going to have to arrange reference calls with people in the past, whoa, they drop out. Good, you didn't want to talk to those people anyway. And so the people who stay in to complete your application form are probably pretty honest and probably pretty good. They know they're not going to be able to get former bosses to talk. Yeah, this is a waste of time. So it automatically elevates the caliber of your candidates. And then in the application form, career history form, is full compensation history. Wouldn't that be wonderful to know? What people were paid in every job? The incredible thing is, people will tell you something perhaps as important as that. Now, that's very important, because if someone's current comp is way above what you can pay, or then forget it probably. Or if it's way, way below, perhaps the person is just not as skilled or as experienced. But boss ratings, we found, are very important. Ask for every full-time job, who is your boss by name, what's your best guess as to how that boss would rate your overall performance. Excellent, very good, good, fair, poor. And probably 2 million candidates over the years have been reference checked. And the word we hear all the time is, they're telling the truth. They are remarkably accurate in their guesses as to how bosses rate their overall performance. And you better see a whole lot of excellent and very good. And if there's a pattern in which candidates say their bosses would rate them good, is good good enough? If a person, Chuck, had 4 jobs in the past 15 years and says every boss would rate me good on a scale of excellent, very good, good, fair, poor, would that be good enough for your company?
For our organization? No,
Yeah.
I don't think. I hope not.
No,
because the good news and the bad. Yeah, the good news and the bad news about our organization is we are one of the larger employers in a small town, so we can afford to be very choosy on our employees. So yeah, good at Benco, good is not good enough. And I agree with everything Brad said. We definitely. Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
We definitely use the torque method, the thread of reference check, and that's embedded into the application, and we check all references before we do any hiring. And I agree with Brad that has really improved the quality and the honesty of the application process and the applicants themselves. So that's the second breakthrough. The second one is application and revising our application and getting more accurate data before anybody even comes in for the first interview. The third breakthrough that we had, thanks to top grading, has been improving our rating system. So this is where our own implementation of top grading has varied a little bit from what Brad advocates in the book. So Brad and I have had this conversation, so this will come as no surprise. But we we are very focused on the performance appraisal system, the evaluation system at Benco. Every employee has 2 evaluations a year, one annually and one semi-annually as a checkup. We make sure that everyone has an evaluation. We are very focused on making sure that evaluations aren't too glowing. You know, as a general rule, our company, like many, at least that I know of, many companies out there, our evaluation process was viewed as sort of sloppy and why do we do this? And in fact, I see stuff on the internet these days. We should just, you know, American business should just get rid of the evaluation process. We are absolutely anti that. We feel evaluations are a key piece of our performance management system. And good quality evaluations are absolutely key to, you know, to making sure that we have the right people in the right slots and they know what's expected of them and they get the feedback that they need to improve. That being said, our evaluation system uses a four-level system. We use exceeds expectations, meets expectations plus, meets expectations, and below expectations. So basically, you can think of it as A, B plus, B, and C. So we added this sort of B plus rating. We struggle a little bit because the top grading system uses a different set of criteria, A, B, and C, and you know, Brad advocates to get, is it 60% A players, Brad, that you advocate for?
90%. Ultimately.
90%.
Yeah.
Ultimately, 90% A players. So we struggled for a few years in our top grading implementation because we had one rating system for based on top grading and another rating system based on our evaluation system. So what we did was we integrated the two together, and we call anyone who gets an exceeds expectations or a meets plus as an A player in our system. And we do use a forced curve. Our forced curve is that we want basically 20% exceeds expectations, another roughly 35% meets expectations plus. So A players we would call about 55% of our population, about 15% below expectations, and the rest meets expectations, whatever the math works out. So we took a long time to integrate those two systems together. We're much happier since we did that. The problem that we had before, and maybe some others of you on the phone struggle with it, is, you know, we use an evaluation system which has a rating scale, and top grading as a system that has a rating scale, and we had employees with 2 different ratings. So we would have employees where on their annual evaluation they would be rated B, but yet when you say in a top grading questionnaire out to people, they'd rate them an A, and we come back and say, well, why is this person an A on one scale and a B on the other? And we had a lot of conversations and spun our wheels a lot around that. About 3 or 4 years ago, we consolidated those two, and we've gotten much better feedback and ratings from that system.
Yeah, there's a question someone just sent, and that is, have your standards for performance changed over the years? And I'm going to interpret that to mean for meets.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay,
the answer to the question, because we go through that a lot, the answer to that question, and it's really the right question, is we deliberately in our organization use exceeds, meets plus, meets, and below expectations. And our answer is, so we come back to people and we have managers, and they might have 10 employees. And they come back and say, I've got the best department in the company, all of my people are terrific, I want to go outside of the basic forced curve that we use, and I want to give 80% of my people exceeds expectations. And our answer back is, perhaps your expectations are a little bit low. The beauty of using the expectation scale is, as employees get better, as we get to be a better organization, it allows us the freedom to raise expectations. And we believe that there's always opportunity for people to improve. Any employee or associate who has nothing written on their evaluation that they can improve, we send that evaluation back to the manager. Everyone has something that they can improve, and everyone has a way that they can improve the expectations. And if you believe that all of your associates, all of your direct reports all exceed expectations, our answer back from the HR end is, perhaps you need to increase your expectations. So the answer to the specific question is yes. Over the years, as the company's gotten better and the quality of employees has gotten better, our expectations have improved as well, and we've maintained this idea of a forced curve.
Okay.
So that's the third breakthrough. And then the fourth breakthrough, which is the last question that Brad asked before I got started, was where are you going with this? What's your next focus around top grading? And the next focus around top grading for us is going to be around succession planning. like many organizations, we struggle with succession planning. You know, we have 1,300 employees, so we're larger than some, but smaller than a lot of big corporate companies, and we're family-owned business. So succession planning has not been something that we've done very well. Integrating top grading into our succession plan, where everybody has to, you know, has to identify who's the person who might succeed you in your job. What are we doing to develop those people? Who are the A players in the organization, and what are we doing to nurture them? Who are the C players in the organization? What are we doing to exit them? How are we helping to get the B players to be better? All of those things are integral to top grading, and succession planning is really where we want to go next with the system. And we're very excited about that. That's sort of what we feel is the next frontier, to get really good at succession planning, which is more than just identifying who the next person is to move up to a position. To us, it's really how can we make sure that we're nurturing the A players, growing the B players, and exiting the C players.
You're big enough now that that it might be worthwhile to consider what a lot of the larger companies do when there are succession planning interests, and when there are people you don't know that well. You know, in a small company, you really know everybody really well, so that's not the issue. It's just, okay, are they ready or not? What do they need to do to be ready? So if there's doubt, you're large enough, and there's some people who seem to have excellent potential. You're not sure. What a lot of larger companies do is a tandem top grading interview. Okay, followed by interviews typically scheduled on the hour with higher level people, peers, subordinates, maybe even customers if there's a salesperson or something like that. It's really quite like.
It's a great idea.
Yeah, it's like.
We have not done that, but that's a great idea. So what you're saying is top grading interviews after someone's already employed as a way of figuring out where they might fit into a succession plan.
Yeah, either figure out where they might fit, which we would say is like a top grading audit, or if there is a specific opening and you're looking at internal candidates and maybe external, then you might have the job scorecard for that specific job, and then do the top grading interview in tandem, and the internal references is about what it is with boss, peer, subordinates, and so forth, to be able to judge whether a person's an A-player candidate for that promotion. So yeah, an audit if you just don't know, or you're considering candidates for promotion if there's a specific job.
Thank you. That's great. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm writing that down. So those are the four, I would say the four big, well, 3 and 1 to come breakthroughs that we've had thanks to top grading. It's not the only way we've executed top grading in the organization, but in the short amount of time we have, I want to just focus on the things that have really had the biggest impact in the quality and retention of the people that we have in the organization.
Yeah, cool. Question, we get this every single chat. Question is, what sort of impediments did you face, and how might you have overcome them? If there's pushback, what are the obstacles to rolling out top grading is maybe a different way of phrasing that, and how would you suggest?
We had no obstacles in our organization. Everybody just bought right in, and they went out and they bought the book and they read it, and they just I could give you a chapter and verse about the obstacles. So like most organizations, the first obstacle in our organization, I can only speak for us, is that most of the managers in our organization already think they top grade. They already think that they're great interviewers, and they already think that they have no issues around hiring people. And you ask, well, why do you have turnover in your department? Then they give you an answer like, oh, well, we don't have that much turnover, or I don't know what you're talking about, or the whole thing. So the basic impediment was changing, getting everyone to admit that this is something that we could do better. And in fact, in our organization, I'll admit that it was something that we did not do well before. It was definitely not only not a strength, it was a weakness. So making sure everybody, getting everyone sort of level to the fact that, yeah, this is a process that we can improve. There's no magic bullet. This is not like a wizard, like where someone's going to come out and wave a wand and they're going to find the right person. This is a process that can be improved, that we as an organization need to improve. Once we got past that, it broke down a lot of walls. And in our organization, I don't know how everyone else's organization is, it was not immediate. In our organization, the first year everyone sort of looks at you and they sort of laugh and they sort of say, yeah, this is flavor of the month, this is going to go away. Then the next year they get a little more skeptical and think, well, maybe doesn't seem to be going away. Maybe I should start to learn about this. And by year 3, the rank and file start to buy in because they figure out this is not going away. So part of the way we got it executed in the organization was basically the HR department getting very direct with people and saying, we're not signing off on this hire because you did not use top grading process to do the hire. And our experience is all you need to do, all the HR, one of the great aha moments for me as a leader in our organization was, and George as well, and maybe some people get this, maybe not, is in our organization prior to the top grading implementation and other implementations we've done, the HR department really viewed themselves as servants to the rest of the organization. What I mean when I say that is, they viewed themselves as paper pushers. They were the support mechanism for hiring managers, and basically their job was to support the organization. And one of the learnings that George, our HR expert, and I had over the years was we turned that around and we said, no, you don't, the HR department has the ultimate power in our organization. Number one, no one gets hired until someone in HR presses the button, right? So we would have people in the field make offers to their brother-in-law and just make these hires that didn't make any sense, and the HR department would go, well, okay, I guess the offer is made, and they type in the system and they press enter, and the person became an employee. The HR department has power over the hire and power over raises. No one gets a raise until someone in HR at Benco Dental presses the button, and as soon as the HR department recognized that they had that ultimate chokehold on those two very important issues, they got a lot more respect because they just start turning things away. We're not putting this person on the payroll no matter what you say, Mr. Hiring Manager, because you didn't use top grading systems, you didn't check the references, you didn't have them fill out the right application, so we don't care really what you said. The answer is go do it again because we're not pressing enter on the keyboard. And once we started having those kind of conversations, everybody started to figure out that we were serious. And that was part of our success.
Yeah, good. Yeah, that's good. Some companies have like certification. How do your managers get trained to
in our organization? We do training on a regular basis with new managers, especially around interviewing. So we have new manager orientation, and we have ongoing training through the year. But that's really hard because, like our organization's in 40 states, so really getting everyone leveled at the same level of training on interviewing skills and other things. I'd be lying if I said that we really do that very well. I think we've had some mixed success with online training. We just did hire a new trainer in the HR department to really make sure that everybody's up to speed. But like everybody else, we struggle with that. As soon as you think you've got everybody trained, somebody leaves, you hire somebody new, and all of a sudden, not everybody's trained. So it's hard. We've seen some success just from keeping track of it and making sure people get the training, and really executing on the control end of it, because part of the training is here's what you can do, and here's what you're not empowered to do. So don't do it because we're not going to say yes to this request.
So you use tandem top grading interviews, 2 interviewers?
Yes, we do. The HR department is involved in every interviewing, and that's, by the way, new in the last few years. The HR department gets to weigh in on every single final candidate and even a few candidates before, so that's an important part of it. And the HR people are definitely trained on top grading. So if the hiring manager is not, at least we've got one person in the process who understands it from start to finish.
Okay. Just a little bit of history for those who hadn't heard. I don't think we'd be doing this call today if the CEO of General Electric hadn't approved something. Actually, it was Jack Welch as CEO and Larry Bossidy as vice chairman. And I'm talking about big companies, and Chuck and others know that I feel top grading is probably more important for small companies, but that's a different point. GE went from about 25% success to 50% success, promoting people and hiring people, with their managers trained, using the same basic career history form Chuck was referring to, same top grading interview guide and so forth, but they're doing solo. So I had a breakfast with Larry Bossidy, who went on to become chairman of Honeywell in March, and we had a walk down memory lane, and he recalled the huge jump in the success from 50% to 90% at General Electric when they went to tandem top grading interviews. 2 interviewers. 2 heads are so much better than 1. And it was a very short conversation with Jack and Larry. How can we do better than 50%? I said, well, workshops, we always have 2 interviewers, and man, it's smooth and it's professional. And that was it. It was a very short conversation. Maybe you comment on that. Is it hard or easy with 2 interviewers?
Well, we find that it works very well, and clearly a lot of it depends on the 2 people in the room. But it's harder. They need to coordinate. They need to make sure they're not talking over each other all the time. But the benefits are hugely important. And as I said before, getting someone from the HR department who really is fully trained on top grading as part of the interview process just makes everything go much better because they know what to ask, what not to ask, and they can really guide the hiring manager through the process. Certainly better than the hiring manager would do on their own. And our HR department is very good. One of the things that we ask the HR department is they sometimes get involved and say we should hire this person, but they always get involved if there's something in the process that says to them we should not hire this person. So we keep track. When the HR department person says we shouldn't hire this person, here's why. If the hiring manager makes a case and goes over that and hires the person anyway, almost invariably, like 90% of the time, the HR department person is right. So we try to train the hiring managers. You don't hire over the objection of the HR department person. They're usually right on the negative side.
Yeah, the HR managers become the best interviewers because they do so many more. A sales manager, whatever the hiring manager is, might do, I don't know, 10 a year, whereas the HR people do 100 a year. Yeah, they get to be really, really good at this, so they can connect the dots. So that's a good point.
No question at all.
Yeah. Now, I mentioned the job descriptions and jobs. We call it job scorecards now. Do you start with trying to nail down exactly what the accountabilities are going to be? Someone hired beforehand. Are you rigorous about?
I think we're very rigorous about it. We probably could tighten it up and do better. But basically, we start every one of the processes with a really good job description, and that's relatively new. If you don't have a good job description and clear idea of what the accountabilities are for the job, then you may as well not start the hiring process. And the HR team has been very good the last few years to really make sure that hold the hiring manager accountable for a good, solid job description before we start the hiring process. So I would say yes. We're probably B plus A minus on that, and that's pretty good. It definitely has improved the results.
And then that job description, or we call job scorecard, then meshes what you've talked about in your performance management system. People are hired to score so many points, get so many field goals, or whatever it might be, and then that's the basis of their performance appraisal then, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, and the whole thing, so one of the main ahas that I would share with the group is it's easy for all of us as managers to get sort of inundated with different systems to use in the HR department. Everyone's got a different system for this or that. The key in our organization in making progress and traction was integrating those systems together. So, job descriptions have to align with performance appraisals, which have to align with top grading, which has to align with the interview system. When it works, it's because it works as a holistic system. When it doesn't work is when there's different processes that are sort of conflicting with other processes.
Yeah, cool. You've sort of given the basic course in top grading. I'll just summarize it rather than taking some time. I met with you in person recently, so I was pretty sure you would do this. But you want to simplify that big, fat top grading book. Top grading comes down to start with a job scorecard, a clear job description. All right. If it's vague, then it's easy to have mishires. Number 2, use the TORC technique, T-O-R-C, threat of reference check. This can be built into your application form. All right. That motivates C players and people with fictitious resumes to drop out, so you're only interviewing the better candidates. Get the information at the application stage on how their bosses would rate them, what their compensation history is. Do a tandem top grading interview. Not a solo. Well, solo, yes, for entry-level jobs. I'll talk about that in a second. And then the threat of reference check isn't a threat. And by the way, it's not a threat to A players anyway. It's more of a promise. A player candidates love to arrange for those reference calls with former managers and others because they know those individuals will sing their praises. And so that's about it. Motivate people to be honest, know what the job is, do tandem interview, do the reference calls. That's, maybe top grading in a nutshell. And in the reference calls, Chuck, do you find that that the reference calls are valuable for confirming or verifying what people have said? Do they add new information that might be helpful in onboarding, or is it kind of a bureaucratic step that you just ought to do?
I think it's very helpful. In fact, the first suggestion that I think Brad and I are on the same page about is the hiring manager in a perfect world should do the reference checks. There's no question. Because if nothing else, even if the answer is, would you hire this person again? The question is, would you hire this person again? And the answer is yes. I could still learn a lot as the hiring manager about how can I help this person succeed in this new role? Here's what the role really requires.
Sure.
What are the things that will work? Where is this person going to struggle? What were the struggles that you had with this person? I find them to be very, very helpful. The one thing that I wanted to add, which didn't come up before, but I think should, is we oftentimes have people who say, well, because in our world we're hiring from competing companies all the time. So they say, well, I can't give you the name of my boss because they don't know I'm looking, or it's a competitor situation, and therefore they may not give the right answer. So we always get a reference to check, even if it's not the person's direct supervisor. It could be somebody they worked with. And I have found almost as much success doing reference checks with peer employees as I have with supervisors. So just because, and because we hear that a lot, well, I used to work for one of your competitors, and if you call my manager, they're never going to say, great, you should hire this person because we compete. Okay, great. Well, then you know what? Give me the name of a person or a customer you worked with who would serve as a reference, because otherwise it becomes an excuse where, on 5 of the last 7 jobs the person had, they give you an excuse why they can't give you a why their direct supervisor is not the right person to be a reference. And you have to work around that.
Or someone who's left the company.
Yeah.
Right. So there are ways around that. There are questions about the lower levels, and yes, we've done a lot in the past few years to simplify top grading for lower levels, and the quick summary is for the career history form, like for people who have just had part-time jobs, just ask them to go back maybe 5 years with their part-time jobs. The top grading interview for entry-level stocker, cashier, or clerk, data entry clerk or something might be 45 minutes. It's a chronological interview. You go through high school. They probably didn't have college, but 2 or 3 jobs, and that's about it. You just do reference calls? Yep. Maybe it's only 2. Maybe they're only 10 minutes long. That what Chuck was thinking of, and I was thinking of for maybe a mid-manager. Those could be there could be 45-minute calls. You're trying to learn how to best work with the person, but for an entry-level person, it's more straightforward. So simpler, easier, quicker, but definitely for lower levels where the cost of the turnover and the image of the company is so important. So looking to the future, what are any thoughts where you might use top grading in the future, Chuck?
Yeah, so the main thing that we're working on right now. We have an echo. Hold on. Try again. Hello. The main thing we're working on right now is around the succession planning piece.
Yeah.
Which I talked about before. That's really the next challenge. We want to get much better at succession planning.
Okay. Super. And I'm sure you will. And you blend top grade into that, and that'll be cool. What I do like a little diversion right now, and then come back. There are 2 or 3 more questions where your insights will be very valuable. Let's go ahead to this doctoral dissertation. The fellow's name is Lawrence, Mike Lawrence, is now Dr. Lawrence, who vetted top grading case studies. When we've done case studies, I always say, make sure there's integrity in the data. Don't lie about the data. Make sure, because someone's going to check it, And so these are obviously on the left, Good Eats Company, brand consultants, and so forth. These are made up names, type of company it is. And it's a little bit unusual how we characterize results. Before top grading, we had 80% mishires, 62, 60, 67, 67, for an average of 69%. After top grading, 20, 10, 21, so forth, I'll convert this into the positive. Prior to top grading, it was roughly 31% of the people we hired turned out to be high performers. Since top grading, it's about 90% success. And it's very interesting to go to one more slide here, because what I said earlier, the most common approach to hiring today, it's really all over the world, is to do round-robin competency interviews. But if anyone's interested in getting that dissertation, just email us. I'll send you the 104-page dissertation. But 2/3 of the companies stopped using those round-robin competency interviews. And several of you had questions about how do you transition from the way we have been hiring to top grading. And what I've always said in the book says, hey, if you like your competency interviews, even though they don't do much, in terms of hiring high performers, keep them if you're comfortable with them. But I found the study very interesting, something I didn't even know. The 2/3 of the companies dropped those round-robin competency interviews altogether. Here is one of the insights, though. This takes a lot of pages to explain it in depth, but I thought it was fascinating. Good for you, Dr. Lawrence. As a rigorous employee selection bundle, a bundle meaning there are a bunch of steps. We've talked about these different steps, the job descriptions and so forth. Top grading creates value, okay, as judged by the CEO and in 3 modes, okay. So Dr. Lawrence talked with human resources and CEOs. Financial operational improvement, okay. They say the company is more profitable, more successful because of top grading. Improvement in individual employee performance. This gets a little complicated, but essentially, if you're hiring people who are high performers, who are going to be meets plus or exceeds, on an individual basis, they're doing better because, frankly, there are better performers. There are different individuals there. The C players have left over the years, and we have a bunch of high performers. So you look at the performance of individuals, obviously it's going to be much, much, much better yet. And the reduction of the mishire rate is obvious from that chart that we just showed you. As the costly mishires decline, then that obviously relates to huge savings for the